The weary traveler draws close to the end of the path.
We have never had it so good.
All of this just works.
We are selling tea to China.
You did not have to redeem this, ma'am!
Out with them, forget about them.
Your broadcast is very biased. You've written a lot of ridiculous articles, so I would encourage you to be more journalistic and have more integrity.
Socialism is when the government does stuff.
Hello. I'm not hearing you, Walrus. Are you there? Maybe you lost the connection, so I'm left on my own. I'm just going to check the comments. Are people hearing anything? Ah, shit. I'm being rolled out on stage, and then the host leaves, so I have to just sit and do pause entertainment by myself. So yeah, I'll just bring out the juggling balls in a minute. Who's here? We're late, are we? I think we're like 2 minutes late. I need to check in with Mr. W here. Let's see. See, reporting from Mr. Walrus, he says his audio just cut out, so I think it's the feds that are messing with us currently. Is he coming back in? Yeah, I'll just put on a cassette tape with Rolling Stones for a minute, and I think it may be in 5 he'll be back.
Jesus.
Hello?
All right. Hello. What the hell? I mean, Ludwig, you were here. You can confirm we were chatting moments before we pressed go live. And for some reason, it just didn't work. I think this was a StreamYard issue or something.
Everything seemed fine. I just couldn't see any circles around your avatar.
It just told me that, you know, your audio device no longer exists. And yeah, no, it was there. It just didn't pick up on it. And it did like 30 seconds before. So I'm sorry about that, everyone. Welcome to the Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. I'm glad to see every one of you here who have gathered. I was going to call out some of the chatters for typing late at exactly 8 p.m., but I suppose now we are late, so nothing I can do about that. Okay, so I'm not sure if you talked anything with the other guys in the chat here, but
I felt like a bit like a deer in the headlights. I'm used to a certain flow, and I'm a bit in an energy deficit here, so it's hard to sort of self-generate any any filler entertainment.
Sure.
Some people just have a gene for that stuff. It's difficult for me if I haven't planned anything prior. Not good at
yeah, no
improvising.
worries. I'm sorry to put that on you. Anyway, this episode is called Just Wanted to Grill. It's Easter. We're going to take things a bit chill. We have a couple of articles. We have some stuff we might want to sort of chat a bit about. I mean, if you guys have any sort of like Q&A stuff, like questions you want to throw our way, put them in the chat, and I'll round them up at the end. But I think we'll just get going. So we should probably start with Norwegian politics. And now I have to, because I had to nuke my browser to get this working, I'm going to have to reopen some tabs with some articles. So just a moment here. So, as many of you may know from our coverage earlier, it is election season in Norway. And that means things have actually changed a bit. I'm trying to run this through the Google machine. One moment. Let's do English. It's having a hard time. Today is just like the day of technical issues, isn't it? This was working fine earlier. Couldn't be translated. Let's try a different way. So we do here, and we do translate. We do this. This is really very good. Okay, here we go. And then bring it back up. Okay, here we go. Vingol says, I only follow niche internet content, so it hadn't occurred to me that it's Norwegian election times. Well, it is. So you're going to get the usual election stuff in the papers. Mitchell Couchman says, I only came for Cavill. That's right. I have Henry Cavill and his grill in the thumbnail. Only because I have the same style of grill. And when I wanted a thumbnail, that was like the first image that I could find of someone with that kind of grill. When I Googled it, or it came up in like the first page. I bought that. It's called something because it's like a Japanese sounding name, but I think the one I bought is from Sweden, and it's essentially just like a big egg, but it's like a ceramic egg. So you just put your coal in the bottom, and then there's like airflow through, and you can have various, there's airflow you can do on the top and the bottom, so you can have different styles of oven basically, and you could use it to smoke stuff, which I do a lot. I really like, on the weekends if we're doing stuff in the yard, I can just let something smoke for like 2 to 5 hours while we're doing other stuff. Anyway, let's get into the article here. So this is about the Conservatives who are struggling to gain voters, and they only have sort of top score in two. I guess this is municipalities, or maybe it's regions. The voters believe that the Conservatives are only the best party in two policy areas. Oh, so that's why it's areas. It's in two sort of classes of issues.
Yeah, I was looking at it like, wait, did I just miss the whole thing? I thought, this is two areas of policy, like, to say economics and healthcare, for example, not two geographic areas.
Yeah, it's not geographic. The party believes that the arrows are pointing in the right direction. I mean, that's their job, right? I mean, have you ever seen a politician who's like, "Hey, you guys are kind of getting beaten at the polls. What do you think?" And have you ever seen a politician go like, "Oh yeah, it's real bad. It's over."
Oh no! Oh gosh!
I mean,
Doesn't
maybe
look so
once
good.
maybe once the Zoomers get into politics and they become like party leaders, right? We're gonna have the actual "it's over, we're back" moments.
Well, I have seen a little bit more of that, like with young Norwegian politicians. I wish it was just anecdotal, but I think I can't remember the names on the top of my head. But like young politicians who just quit over like either like internet harassment, for example, or like things just related to the job in general. Like they just go like it's fucking over, and then they just leave their post. So I guess it's good to have boomer resilience if you're going to be in this type of job. Like you can't just let these things get to you in a personal way. If you do,
Yeah.
I think you're finished. Honestly, at least if you're going to be like a face, public facing politician, it's tough. I mean, especially in these days with where sort of right wing populism is ascendant.
I suspect
Exponential
that's
increase in shit that you're getting from people. It's
that's
different
true.
now.
Yeah.
I didn't see the episode. I just we've talked about Wolfgang V, the Norwegian podcaster, on the show previously, and he recently put out an episode where he has Erna Solberg on, right? And he's that big now that where like the top politicians just show up to his podcast to talk. Or at least they consider it, a big enough priority to try to reach that audience. And like I didn't look at the episode, but I could sort of already tell what the comments are going to be. Like, it's like, okay, Erna Solberg, and this is the audience. I know what his audience thinks, and it's just okay. It's gonna be like WEF, COVID conspiracies, and fat bitch. Like that's and you open it, and that's like the top. All of the top voted comments is like, fat cow. The fat cow, when are you releasing the COVID secrets, and why did you ask about the WEF connections? Like that. It's sad that it's so predictable, because like none of the content is really that interesting. Like nobody's referencing anything that's being talked about. It's just kind of they have these gripes that they just want to see politicians drilled on. So we need our own Patrick Bet David, I guess, in Norway. More Iranian imports, please. But anyway, I'm sorry to break it off. It seems like you lost the sharing.
Yeah,
I can't see the article.
It's being weird again, so just give me a moment and I'll try to fix it. It's really annoying because this was okay. I'm gonna have to just live translate this. I'm sorry, everyone.
It might actually be better,
Yeah.
Sometimes,
actually, at some points,
AI messes up.
Yeah. When the paper measured the electorate's judgment over the party politics last year, the Conservatives was scoring best on 7 out of 13 policy areas. Now this number has been reduced to only 2. So this is taxes and I guess what's this in English? It's just taxes.
Well, it is. It is just taxes
and tolls.
Taxes and tolls.
And then economics and working life. I guess this is just general sort of, labor policy, I guess. This is based on a large poll done by, blah, blah, blah. Apparently labor is scoring best in key areas, up to 6 instead of the 2 that the Conservatives are scoring in. And they're scoring high in just general opinion polling, which is insane. Because if you go back, I think they have a graph here. Yeah, you go back like 3 months, they were at like 17%, right? And the Conservatives basically just grew by doing nothing up until this point. Oh, sorry. The Progress Party, which is the alternative right, I guess. Or the populist right, sorry. Meanwhile, the Conservatives have been falling steadily as well, but not nearly as badly. The difference is that while Labour had their upswing in February when we got our head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, back in business, and they got to kick out the Farmers' Party, they had like a huge upswing to about 28%, which I don't quite understand because, I mean, even though sort of the adults are back in the room, quote unquote, they're not really doing that much different. Do you
is
get
this the anti-Trump effect?
It might just be the anti-Trump effect. It's literally just, you know, Musk and Trump is being crazy, so we're going to vote for Stoltenberg, right?
I mean, it looks surprisingly like the Canadian graph. You've seen that shared around on social media, like with the Canadian Conservative Party and the Polar Bear and the Liberals, and they just cross like this around.
It's interesting, though,
time.
because you'd think that the Conservatives would have an upswing too, but they just seem to have lost to Labour, essentially.
They got outflanked. I mean, they tried really hard to pivot to anti-Americanism, and we could read reading the Oslo Toy article afterwards.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Talk about that. But they had like their national conference. What do you call it? The national conservative meeting, and it was just like pure. Like every speech was just like wall to wall anti-American
really was.
rhetoric. So it was quite something. Like they're really trying to get an edge there, but I don't think they. It's not resonating.
I don't think so, no. Let's see here. There's another graph here I wanted to show, but when I can't translate it, this is going to be real annoying. It's just what the parties are sort of winning on. And you can see that the Conservatives are, you know, taxes, economics. If you look at energy and power, Labour is winning, which is insane considering that Labour has been running the show for the past 4 years and they've been doing a really bad job of it, and everyone's been like clamoring, like asking them for, you know, a price ceiling on power, on energy, and they're like doing nothing about it until, you know, it's the playing field is too dire and they have to like. They did like a weird move where they've been against it for like 3.5 years, and then they turned in like a week saying that, oh yeah, no, we're for this the entire time. We just had to, you know, really take our time analyzing this stuff. And it's one of the worst sort of spins I've ever seen, to be honest. And so it really baffles me that they're still sort of winning on this. Security and defense, Labour is winning on, which is easy because they're in government. They have a lot of photo ops with, you know, they've been doing the rounds, you know, taking photos in front of tanks. I get it. Health and schooling, it's kind of their wheelhouse. That makes sense. This is like roads and stuff.
Are you sure?
Makes sense.
Because I'm not.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, okay. If his role is, it's basically anti-toll sentiment, then isn't it?
Essentially, yeah. District, which is the Farmers' Party, makes sense. Elder care, Labour, makes sense. Children and families, Labour, makes sense. Immigration and integration, which is the Progress Party. Environment and climate, which is the Environment Party. And when it comes to differences in society in terms of like social classes, I guess, or social stratas, Labour is losing out to the socialist left. Now, what's kind of interesting too is that the populist right has been losing as well. And I guess maybe all of this is attributed to the Trump effect. It's just kind of stark that, are we really saying that basically everything that the Progress Party has been gaining on has been, let's call it, I forget his name, but luxury beliefs? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is the stuff people can sort of afford to care about, but oh, whoops, we might have World War III, so let's go back to Labour.
No, I think it's a referendum on populism in general, really. the same way you think about market movements or stock movements. So you can sort of trace. I think America is a unique case in itself, where like their view on Trump, I think in general, is more positive than everybody else's view on Trump. But this does track with, I think, general sentiment on, if you look at it as a referendum on populism. That's kind of how I read this graph. Like how do you feel about the populist surge in Europe?
I agree.
And it was really, really hot at around the Trump election, and then it's been going downward.
It should be fair to say that whether as a sort of, yes, Trump has an effect, but the online right, and I guess the populist right, as you call it, have really done a number on themselves. And I made a bit of a, doomer post about this on Twitter that got some traction in our circles. And I'm really starting to feel that, going the populist right route isn't going to be possible. Like, we're going to have to look into, because the problem at this point in the West, in the countries that are still doing well, and most of Europe compared to America is actually doing quite well. I mean, of course, every time we talk about these things, it's difficult to do it because, everyone's going to be like, oh, but what about immigration? Like, of course, there's problems, right? But the West, i.e. Europe, is all in all doing quite well, especially sort of the Germanic Europes, right? So Scandinavia and Germany, etc., are on paper doing quite well. And I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. What we do need to move towards, I believe, is embracing, more, as I called it in our speech in Tromsø, more illiberal measures, which means that, we can keep the democracy because we're the 130 IQ Anglos or whatever. But the way out of this is basically we have to reinforce unity or something, because at this point, you got essentially a third column in your nation saying, screw this. We're just going to hope Russia comes or something. And we talked about this before the show. I don't know what a lot of these people want. They're sort of just complaining. And they're not really offering a different worldview. They're just kind of like, I'm done with society. I just want to opt out. Can we just burn it to the ground or something? And, oh yeah, based and all that. But it's not even in this kind of like anarchy mindset either. It's very strange. And these people are going to be... going to have to be, dealt with, as well as other columns, such as, I see someone in the chat naming NGOs. NGOs, for sure, are a problem, but they can be dealt with, right? I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit. Does this make sense to you? Like
no problem. I mean, I see what you
mean.
Hang on
a moment.
Like with
Ride Forever saying, go straight to the NGOs, they can stop the invasion. Well, I'm going to have to nuance post here a little bit, because you say the invasion, but I mean, speaking from my specific point of view in Norway, we don't have a huge issue with immigration. And listen very carefully, we don't have a massive issue of immigration. We have issues with immigration, but it's nothing like the UK. It's nothing like parts of Germany. It's nothing like parts of France. We don't have Swedish conditions, right? So we're sort of much more free to move around this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, you can defend the NGOs all that you like, but there's, I think some of it's going to, as you saw in the ratings there, down below in the article, popular sentiment it's still with the populists when it comes to immigration. And I feel like the populist movement seemed to have an identifiable ideology. You can call it an ideology or an agenda, about 10 years ago or something, say even 5 years ago. It's imagine like Trump won, for example. I felt like that was an identifiable set of ideas. It's like close the border. Well,
build the wall, right.
Build a wall was sort of the thing there. I guess there was some other points as well, but like what stuck out was the sort of, okay, you're going to just build a wall and get control over immigration, take care of our own people. It was kind of simple, but since then it's gotten more popular. I think the big turning point was like 2020, the COVID stuff, when I feel like a lot of the I don't know what you want to call it, a lot of the hippies just started breeding with the right-wing populists, and what you got out of it.
We talked about
this kind of
you can go back to early Longhouse episodes, and we talk about like how these days once you step out of the Overton window, you're sharing spaces with some LSD guys, right? And that's kind of weird. But it just got worse. Right?
You like you said, you go to the anti-lockdown protest, and on one your left hand there's a guy standing there in a suit or something with a Norwegian flag, and on the other hand there's some hippie with like dirty dreads. So with the crystal around her neck, and there's been like this kind of interbreeding between the populism and a lot of this kind of alternative thinking, magical thinking stuff, as well as some other more nefarious elements. But it's really changed kind of the signal to noise ratio. I mean, populism was never very disciplined to begin with. This was always the issue. Like when people get power, it sort of falls apart a little bit because they don't really have a good structure. You don't have the human capital necessarily. But now, like with it's more popular, or at least it's taken a hit recently. But it's gotten more popular. But also, as the more popular it gets, the more incoherent it gets, and it's sort of just like this noise ball, or like I've described it as like a political hand grenade, and it's like a chaff grenade, where it blows up and it just hits everybody around it. And like there's different takes on this. Like say someone like Academic Agent has talked about this, not in these terms, but like I think one of the speeches that he did on one of the Schillings events about like when he was talking about Piers Morgan Uncensored and a lot of these slop content channels. And it's really framed more as a kind of, this is a containment mechanism to stop any kind of actual resistance from interfering with the regime or the kind of established system. Yeah. But my view on this is that it is more like a sort of hand grenade that is just kind of going off in the middle of the system, and it's not benefiting the establishment. That this populist stuff is just continuously growing. It's hurting them, but the damage is going the other way as well. Like it's hurting actual serious people who are trying to do reforms and who want to like actually have like you want to take like maybe a like more serious conservative or right wing change to society, and that's also going to be swallowed up in the explosion of this kind of, like you said, you ask these people what do they actually want. It's never quite clear. They want to occupy space, complain, be antisocial. Like somebody, I don't know who coined this term, but it's like pseudo-populism or something, where there's not just like the magical thinking element, but there's also kind of a sadistic element to this policy, to these politics as well, where they seem to just want to use this as an outlet for their own anger, in a sense. Like politics is like a vehicle for their need to do team sports, their need to have meaning, their need for kind of sadistic supply. And okay, this is fine, but it's just like everything except actual politics, so like you said, you're gonna have to find a way to get around this if you want. If you're thinking forward, you're thinking longer time frames, how exactly are you going to bring about some constructive change? And it's not going to be through like this kind of Jack Posebic types. It just isn't. Like I was going to bring this up later, but say guys like Joe Rogan, the people that he brings on, for example, like they're not going to bring about any constructive change. You can use them to disrupt the people who currently have power, but other than that, it's just kind of, they don't have anything.
Yeah, it's, you're flashbanging the room, but you're not really, you're not following it up with anything. Right? You just flashbanged a bunch of terrorists, but you don't actually enter, right? So then what's the point?
I mean, it has a meta-political effect, right? Okay, if I'm going to do a devil's advocate on myself here, right? The populism has had the sort of metapolitical effect. I mean, people talk about how the Overton window is cringe and everything, but I genuinely do think that now you can talk about different things in politics without being pushed out of the room, right? I think you could, even in these Western European countries or Scandinavian countries, you can bring up things that would have been considered non-kosher 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and mix in what you'd consider like more kosher approved or sort of regime approved politics with non-regime approved things. It seems to have kind of reshuffled the board quite a bit, and this enables, I guess, more sort of targeted things to come in later. But the way that it currently exists, like a lot of this populism stuff is just going to have to be pushed out because like nobody's benefiting from it in the end. It's just like this giant grift machine. But yeah, let's just get through the article and then we could.
Well, I think we could
look at some
out of this
what
one.
comes
So
next.
we'll move on to the other one. Let's see here, and this one I actually managed to translate. Now this is from Asle Toje. He is a foreign policy researcher and commentator. He's written a bunch of books. He's in sort of the Norwegian conservative sphere, I suppose. He's quite well known. Norwegian anti-Americanism is not new. What is new is that it's migrated to the Conservative Party. How can so many people feel so let down by a country that is so far away? Of course, this is all about politics, but there's also something more. After Ireland, Norway was the country in Europe that gave the largest proportion of its population to North America. Today, there are almost as many Norwegian Americans as there are Norwegians. It is not surprising that America has played a central role in the Norwegian self-image, and especially, in places where I live on the south and southwestern coast, there are small towns that, to this day incorporate English words in their language because, their grandpa spent his entire adult life in America doing work over in New York, and then sort of returning back in his older years because you can earn so much more money than you could back here. Let's see here. American popular culture, economy, and values have functioned. One more thing. But I do like to draw a distinction from the people who went over there to work and then imported culture back versus the sort of intentionally exported culture of America that came along a lot of the other stuff, sort of the mainstreaming. That's two different sort of modes of exchange. Let's see here. The country across the ocean has in many ways become, quote, the other for Norway. Uncritical admiration has now alternated with anti-Americanism. Author Jens Bjørnboe's campaign pamphlet, Those Who Loved America, formed a tradition from 1966, formed a tradition that is still upheld. Quote, America had become dangerous, frightening, sinister. It represented conformism, corrupt justice, violence, military power, and above all, the USA aspired to world domination. End quote. This seems especially precarious when Republicans are in power. Bjørnboe began his essay by claiming that President Dwight D. Eisenhower was a cannibal. Jesus. The essay would explain why we no longer love America, but rather hate it. The embittered tone has unfortunately also become the theme of the Norwegian debate. The resentment of the Norwegian intelligentsia towards America is in itself worth studying. How can so many feel so let down by a country so far away? It's about politics, but it's also about something more. And I haven't read this article, so I'm not sure if he's going to call it out, but this is the thing that I've sort of missed from the debate, at least here in Norway, is sort of, it's a bit tone deaf to not, like, when people talk about like Trump doing tariffs, they sort of talk about just the economics of it. And I think an important point that is being missed is that it's kind of rude when you're the sort of center of the empire to be doing what they're doing. I mean, there's other, like a lot of the history bros have been talking about this. There's a lot of examples of this, but a point that's being missed, I think, is that considering what America has done before and the situation they have built for themselves and for us. What America is doing now is rude. There's no other word that sort of covers it, I think.
I think, Oslo is less focused on this because I skimmed over this when you sent it to me previously, and I saw some people on Twitter had commented on it, right? And okay, I don't want to spoil the article, but his central point is that the anti-Americanism ends up becoming a kind of crutch instead of talking about actual policy, right? Where he says that, okay, well, maybe you should have seen some of these problems coming down the line and not, try to dismantle the military too much. Or
I agree.
and of course, yeah, it is a good point. You can't just have your entire politics just be anti-Americanism and then not do anything. Like,
no.
You have to try to fix the problems that are actually there and not make this an identity onto itself, which of course it's a fair point. But generally he's going to be pressured, on both sides of this. I guess from the center he will be pressured because he's not, it feels like he's downplaying what America is doing, and from the people on the kind of populist fringe, he is not pro-American enough, right?
Yeah,
and this is
putting himself in a precarious position. Yeah,
I think that's kind of Oslo Toye's, a business card, or what do you call it, like his modus operandi, is putting himself in these kind of like in between positions between like the center and the populists without actually reaching
the I am very smart position. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is that he's not really reaching any good conclusions. I feel like it's a kind of misunderstanding where people talk about, what is a kind of bipartisan conclusion or a non-partisan political conclusion, that it's like, okay, if you have two sides to a political issue and you take 50% of one and 50% of another, and then you reach a new solution, like a synthesis, then you're bipartisan or whatever. But usually that's just retarded. Most of the time, one side is correct. It's not always the same side, but with most issues, one side of the political aisle is going to have the right idea generally about the issue, and the other is just kind of off. So
it does tend to feel a bit, that comic with the guy in the well saying, "Yet you participate in society. How curious," right?
Yes.
I am very smart.
But so the people who try to do like this kind of centrism where you meet both sides halfway, then you get just a worse outcome than you would get just being 100% partisan. I honestly believe this. Like, for the people who try to do this, like this kind of centrism that he is doing, and I think part of it is because he has, he wants to be on the inside. He is credentialed. He is respected. And like he sits on like the Nobel Committee, and he wants to be taken seriously. Well, at the same time, he knows that he has a big audience on the far right who are reading his kind of "The West Has Fallen" material. Generally, it's really this. That's what his books are about, right? I have the Gullbrikkespillet, and that series that he has about decline, European decline, and these are interesting books. But that's essentially, he is kind of a decline narrative peddler, while at the same time needing to be taken seriously. So you have to straddle this line in between those two forces, and the conclusions that he arrives at are usually just outright awful. And you can see this because he was critical of Trump in 2016, right? He has been on podcasts talking about, generally the West has fallen, but Trump is not the right guy to fix it. That's been his thing, and he catches a lot of ire in the comments for this. But like before Trump wins in last year, he comes out and being pro-Trump, like basically saying that we should give Trump a chance. And like, so it's so funny because his criticisms of Trump are basically evergreen now, considering what Trump has done in office. His criticisms are perfectly sound, his judgment of Trump in like 2018, for example.
Unless you account for him being pro-Trump this election.
But like because of the shift in sentiment, like with the graph that you saw, and Trump's surging popularity, he has to kind of meet people halfway. And meeting people halfway, it's like, okay, let's give Trump a chance, even though like maybe his independent judgment was that, okay, maybe this is not a good idea. And if he had just stood by that, he would have actually looked fairly good. But this is like a guy who, you know, if you like, you're reversing your position in the market before a crash. Like you're going long before the stock is crashing. Basically, that's kind of what he's done. It's just like the absolute worst possible thing. It's like being anti-Trump in 2018 and then being pro-Trump before Trump crashes everything. And
It's
like
he's
not
like
a dumb
Jim
guy.
Cramering politics.
Yes, exactly. But like he's just not a dumb guy. But when you're trying to do this kind of 50-50 balancing act, you always reach like the absolute dumbest conclusions, and that's why
Maybe
I
he's
feel about a
falling,
lot of the takes that he has.
Maybe he's falling victim to what is the word that oh my god, mold bug. What's his name?
Arvin.
Man, I should Mensch's mold bug. Curtis Yarvin, what he calls like the doofus traps, with like people who are smart enough get sort of caught up in like the minutia of the theory of just like going down these rabbit holes. Like it's interesting to him that he can create this synthesis, but it's not useful to anyone.
Yeah, I get what you mean, but I don't think that's the case here. Like the doofus traps is sort of Eric Weinstein is like a doofus trap guy.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Curtis Yarvin himself is a doofus trap guy.
That's
okay,
true.
Like you know, I've said this before. Like his entire ideology is kind of a doofus trap, where he is just like hyper focused on this kind of revisionist niche points, while sort of missing the larger picture in many instances. But with Ashley Toya, I think it's like audience capture. That's the problem.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yep. Let's see here. The traditional explanation was that the Norwegian intellectuals are red, meaning left, which they mistakenly assumed that the American left is too. As author Org Borchevink pointed out in a memorable salvo from 2007, quote, "The United States is the aphrodisiac that provides foreign policy popular uprisings on the left." He was onto something. For a long time, our bourgeois bohemians took to the streets to protest the actions of the United States, while ignoring, forgiving, and explaining away similar actions by other powers. In 2025, the new thing is that the strongest anti-Americanism is now to be found on the liberal right. During the Conservative Party's national convention this March, Michael Tetzschner called Norway's most important ally, the United States, an enemy of the West. At the same meeting, Erna Solberg encouraged people to buy European goods and to vacation in Europe. It is difficult to read this as anything other than a call for a boycott of the United States. I also seem to remember that, I'm not sure if it's still in effect, but Germany put the US on like a be careful list if you're traveling. Maybe that was just virtue signaling, but that was a fun moment. This is a little reminiscent of the Labour Party in the 1980s. Back then, some people also wanted to leave NATO because they disagreed with the president at the time, Ronald Reagan. The reason is fundamentally the same: a break with Norwegian foreign policy dogma. Reagan's confrontational line against the Soviet Union and other enemies, combined with more religion and more nationalism, was as shocking to the Labour Party in the 80s as Trump's abdication of Davos liberalism, interventionism, the Green Shift, and a UN-led world order would be to the Conservative Party today. Now that's a bit of a take, because I see the Conservative Party as one of the biggest... Well, I guess, no, I see what he's saying here. But I would say that Labour is at least equally on board with a lot of this.
I think they are now, but it is because of readjustments. There is a history of Labour and certain parts of the Labour movement that have been very friendly to like the Soviet blocs and wanting to engage in a certain amount of Soviet appeasement. I mean, this is something they've corrected. But that's the case, I think, for the left across the, at least what you say, like the Western sphere. Anyway, that you have people who are like hard communist sympathizers until some information comes out about these regimes, and then they just sweep it under the rug, and everything is forgotten. They just pretend that they were liberal the whole time. So it's easy to forget about it if you don't have like a longer time frame.
That's true. An irrational antithesis. And, oh, by the way, it's also a thing you get this in European politics more than you get in like English, because we have parliamentary politics usually. Is that the party history doesn't necessarily matter as much from like leader to leader. Like you talk more about like the different eras depending on who's in charge, and the party basically kind of changes character based on the makeup of its leaders. So you can't just sort of say that, you know, the conservatives have always been like X or Y, because you have to consider who was in charge and look at their personality instead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's elite theory pilled, at least to an extent, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to look at the groups of elites that are in power, who they're allied with, their constituents, their what do you call it, their patronage networks, and you consider that before you think about like I think it's a waste of time for a lot of people who go down this.
Yes, but it's a bit harder in nations that have like two-party systems, because then the institution, quote unquote, has a bit more of a history, right?
Yeah, but even with that stuff, you get you've heard these kind of cringe American arguments, like, okay, which party founded the KKK? Which party ended slavery? As if the like the Democrat Party who supported the KKK or whatever is like the same as it is now. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
If you show that fact, that Wikipedia article, to a leftist, they will instantly combust. Didn't you know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Owned with facts and logic.
Imagine if the situation was reversed, etc., etc. An irrational antithesis. Knut Hamsun, like Johan Borgen, came home from the USA with a lot of negative things to say about the country. Check out my very first stream if you want to hear what Knut Hamsun had to say about America. He also had a lot of good things to say about America, but he had a lot of good things to say about Americans, not necessarily the country as a whole. Steinar Hansen called the president a jerk, and John Michelet compared the USA to Norway in his petty bourgeois mediocrity. Quote, "It should be possible to love America and at the same time distance oneself from the US administration, values and conduct," suggested Sindre Kartvedt in her travelogue West of Eden, 2003. In practice, reflexive anti-Americanism is a sign of intellectual weight, while the opposite is taken as a sign of the opposite. Oh, that's interesting. I do agree to some extent, but how then do you differentiate from people who are sort of, fashionably anti-Americanist versus people who genuinely want Norway to be more self-sufficient, right?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure I agree entirely that, say, if you're like a transatlanticist or, strong on promoting transatlantic bonds or something, you're considered a moron. I think it's really more of the people who want to import like the cultural trappings of Harley Davidson, Cadillac cars, Bud Light, American football, sure, and so on. Like that's considered low IQ.
Of course.
I think as sort of like a general alliance promotion, it's not considered low IQ. At least that's news to me. If that's
no, I would agree on that. Saying that NATO is cool isn't necessarily a low IQ take, right? But there is a culturally, right, an air around, you only watch American TV, for example. That means, at least it has been historically, right, you would be seen as more lowbrow.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but at the same time, if you ask like a regular European citizen, they probably know more about American local elections than they know about their own local elections. So
that might be true, yeah.
I mean, you have to face the facts.
Nowadays, yeah. I mean, nowadays, right? I'm talking historically, but yes, if you ask someone today, they would, because it's it's total cultural victory. Like some guy in the middle of France has to be occupied with what some feminist protesters in like Wichita did, right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's just the way that it is. I mean, hopefully, if there's anything good that comes out of this, it's that we could occupy less mind space toward American domestic politics.
Hopefully.
But we'll see.
The Dutchman Rob Kroes has an interesting explanation for the Norwegian disappointment with America, namely the USA as the center and Norway as the periphery. Kroes claims in his book America Imagined 2012 that European anti-Americanism is to be understood as ideological Occidentalism. Yeah, you're going to have to explain that one. When European countries were great powers, they cultivated the Orient as something exotic and irrational, in contrast to their own rational and civilized governance. Today, Europeans use America as an exotic and irrational antithesis to legitimize and affirm their own thinking and culture. Well, then it wouldn't be Occidentalism, it would be... No, it is Occidentalism. Sorry, it's not Orientalism. Okay. Yeah, I see what he's saying. That, you know, oh, we're smarter than the stupid Americans, so we're more cultured.
Yeah, he's not wrong. I think it's
that is a genuine strain,
but it's not a bad observation.
No. The right uses anti-Americanism to legitimize the EU. Well, to be fair, specifically the Conservative Party. This is complicated by the fact that American popular culture has displaced our own culture. So we often end up rejecting, quote, the other that we see in the mirror, and we therefore often end up with borrowed traumas, be it the Vietnam War, George Floyd, or the storming of the Capitol on January 6th. He's saying this as like an indictment, but this is just straight up true, right? Like we shouldn't have to deal with this.
And
I feel like that's just... I mean, of course I'm biased here, but I feel like this is just... Everything would literally be better if we didn't have to deal with this.
I think, you know, I guess people on the right using anti-Americanism to justify EU membership, that's a very recent phenomenon. I do not think that, like, you look at the kind of conservative, liberal conservative parties in Europe, and that they would have seen a contradiction between EU membership and transatlantic partnerships or something, or said that we should be in the EU because America sucks. Like, most of them are Gaullists. You know, that's a It was a very, very niche position until Trump too.
Recently,
basically, that's the way that's kind of exploded.
Yeah. Let's see here. There's an interesting book that talks about how before World War II, the public in the UK were asked about the US, and they had no opinion most of the time. After the war, this flipped. Yeah, and I mean, it's no secret that the American cultural dominance is total, right? It's just, you know, us Latoya, I guess, would like to be a contrarian in the question whether or not we should sort of shake some of that off, right? From this perspective, much of the Norwegian criticism of the United States is an echo of internal American debates where domestic policy becomes foreign policy. Much of the Norwegian anti-Americanism is taken directly from the American left when they are in opposition. When they are in power, the whistle blows quite differently. Or I guess it sounds quite differently. Norway has bombed many a country at the behest of the Democrats. In Norway, the failed interventions did not lead to critical self-reflection as they did in the United States. Far from it. Under Trump, anti-Americanism has become a sign of decency, much like going to church was for the older generations. On state media, the presidential election campaign was covered by, quote, 2 expert commentators who openly supported the Democrats. Yes, and I have sort of, I guess if we haven't talked about this much here, but to anyone willing to listen, I've said that this was annoying and a bit of a disgrace that we couldn't find a single sort of at least more neutral commentator, because watching state coverage of the election, regardless of, you know, our opinions on Trump, became annoying because it just quickly became a circle jerk.
Yeah, that is a problem. I mean, there's like 2 aspects of it. You know, that there, this isn't just for like Donald Trump. This would have been for Mitt Romney as well, right? Or any like a much more kind of milquetoast Overton window Republican. You would have still seen the same thing. I mean, let's not pretend that's not true. I think it's easy to maybe look at like the more extreme parts of Trump too and project that onto the past. But no, in reality, it was very circle jerky, and they would throw Republicans under the bus, even though there was like, you know, maybe like 2 inches of difference between them. Like they were, you know, hard on abortion or something. and had 98% of the same opinions as the Democrat candidate,
Exactly,
and that
yeah.
would still be seen as an indictment. And well, it felt suffocating. I think that's a lot of that. The populist reaction that you're getting is that people feel like they have no political elbow room to maneuver around. They can't express any opinion other than like super narrow liberal consensus stuff.
Yeah. America under Trump has become the kind of idol found in some religions symbolizing all evil, and which is ritually stoned by a congregation. Our own foreign policy elites are not exposed to the same critical mindset. This is perhaps one reason why Norway has become stuck in a self-imposed naivety that of Professor Terry Tvedt has called a benevolence regime, where we pretend that good intentions are the same as goodness. Well, I mean, we're going back to the sort of, the old Longhouse adage of two thoughts in your head at the same time. It's quite possible for Norwegian citizens to think that, all right, this American stuff has gone too far, without literally making us an enemy of America on the world stage, right? You're allowed to do diplomacy.
And I also do think that he makes a good point there about like kind of you turning domestic policy into foreign policy, right? And sort of not really, I criticize people who are on the far right for this. It's like they can't really separate foreign policy and domestic policy, and they get it mixed in their head.
Yeah.
But it's also annoying when, like, you're seeing other people do that as well. Like, say with abortion, for example, or border immigration policy or something, that like these are domestic issues inside the United States. And like you're staking out the kind of like an anti-American position because they want to have more conservative abortion laws than you have. Like, and it's just ignoring foreign policy. Like, even if the United States has a foreign policy that's friendly to your country, and it's sort of helpful in a sense towards the same foreign policy goals that you have, but they're slightly more Jesus campy or something. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of my view now. It's like that's
cares?
just like their problem. I'm just interested in kind of, okay, can you coordinate some kind of common ground in terms of foreign policy with like economics, trade, military, these things, and if they want to have sort of wackier things go on inside their country, that's the kind of their problem. I'm not really.
Yeah, and we can discuss whether or not we're going to have crosses on the uniforms. We can do that afterwards, right?
Healthcare, for example. I mean, the list is kind of it's easy to forget it, but it's coming back to me as I'm talking. Things like healthcare. There's like people in Norway who are anti-American because America has a different healthcare system that's it's like more expensive and it doesn't cover as many things, or gun policy or something. This is what I mean. It's like you take an anti-American stance because
like, why do you care?
School shootings, like that's their problem. Honestly, that's like their domestic policy. That's what their population are going to vote on and deal with. So it's not it's not really a part of the
specifically in the case of America, their domestic policy becomes our problem, right?
Well, it has now, because
culturally,
it's really about it's kind of the same. It's a bit of the same problems there as well, where like they can't really do a good separation between foreign and domestic policy. A lot of that J.D. Vance stuff, it's really about like browbeating Europeans for European domestic policy. When in reality, like his role should just be about foreign policy coordination. Like I think that's kind of my view. As I made the comment on Twitter as well. Like I was sort of asking, like, when is like Vance going to engage in some actual politics? Are you just going to sit and like make commentary about like Britain is going to be the first caliphate or something with nuclear weapons? It's like the first. That's the comment that he made. The UK will be the first Muslim country with nukes or something. Okay, that's fine, but like, are you actually going to go and talk to leaders and try to coordinate something militarily or economically or something? Even if it's like withdrawal of military, there has to be some bonds here that are being made. You can't just sit and do this anti-virtue signaling.
What do you really want here? Because I mean, he's in the group chats. He's doing the job. Like he's doing it. Like he signed off on it in the group chat. It's fine. All right. Mitchell Kochman says the U.S. started with the whole "me must spread democracy" propaganda. Well, exactly. I mean, but that's what makes the Trump regime kind of tone deaf. like I understand that it's a two-way street, that Europe accepted this, right? But the Americas were the ones that exported it, and trying to sort of like rug pull on that isn't really going to work, because you've built your entire nation on this over the past 70 years. There's going to have to be some more sort of careful consideration. Let's see here. For Norway, because let's see, Norway is more like the United States than we like to believe. Like the United States, the country has an unabashedly good self-image, crowned with an implicit assumption that all other countries can, will, and should become like us. Based and true. We often overestimate our own importance. We address, well, the difference is that America is actually about as important as they think, though. We address every problem by uncritically throwing money at it. Our opinion leaders are so busy booing the Americans that they overlook our own neo-imperialist project as a humanitarian superpower. Through monetary power, the global South would be Norwegianized. Well, what do you think? What do you think?
I kind of dig it, honestly. This is my ideology now. Norwegianized.com. It's
do you really think like some guy in Africa is gonna, adopt Norwegian values because we give him our money?
I think I read about this, that there are some African countries that were trying to implement like these kind of Norwegian healthcare models because they got Gibbs. Of course, it doesn't work for some reason. I can't quite figure it out. I'm sorry, there's like a beeping sound. Are you getting this as well? Oh yeah, he lost audio again. This is not our day. So okay, I'll just wait for him to rejoin. But yeah, finishing the point there. I wish I could remember which countries it was, but yeah, there are African countries that were trying to implement the Nordic model, right? It's sort of like high tax, welfare, education is paid for, and so on. I mean, of course, this is like. I feel like you're starting at the end a little bit. I mean, my brain is just going into mush here, but the point is that you can't just go from like eating, walking around barefoot and eating maggots from a tree to implementing the Nordic model. There has to be some steps in between.
There's a couple of steps in between, yeah. But I mean, that's a lesson that I hope, right, a lot of us learned. I mean, the sort of meme is always that in the 90s, all we did was just shuffle money and food into Africa and nothing happened, right? And then, from then on, a lot of the humanitarian aid has been more long-term. Now, if that actually works, time will tell. The Chinese are having a hard time of it. Empire of Dust mentioned. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, I think the Chinese will kind of have to, if they want to continue being this kind of manufacturing superpower, they have to offload some of that stuff. I mean, that's something that's not talked about because the American-Chinese debate is so completely retarded because like these Peter Navarro types. But I mean, China is a modernizing economy. And it's
Because it's based in 19th century anthropology built. They yearn to be recolonized. It's just modern colonization through, through just money power.
Like, with China, they have, both because of top-down policy and because of modernization, like a crushingly small birth rate, even though they are huge population, but their working age population is shrinking really fast. I mean, it's similar proportionally to a European country, but it's going so much faster than anyone else. So if they're going to continue to do this kind of be an economic powerhouse from like mass cheap exports, they have to. I think that that's what a lot of these African projects are about, trying to offload some of that manufacturing there.
Definitely,
because the problem is twofold. It's both that their working age population is shrinking, but also that the people who are growing up in China are used to a higher standard. They're not like farmers anymore. They've grown up in a modern city with access to the internet and
RGBs.
technology. So they probably don't want that low-end manufacturing job anymore. Like maybe they want to have a Chinese software company or something instead. So it's just going to be harder for them to continue that model. They can adapt, they can do things. It's not deterministic in the way that someone like Peter Seihan suggests, but they have to do things a little bit differently. And like this is just completely lost on the kind of like China's ripping us off debate here as to like, okay, where's China going to be in like the next 10, 20 years? They're not going to be able to do exactly the same thing simply because of their aging demographics and how exactly this is going to pan out. I mean,
they have their own issues.
China,
right?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about maybe we should do some more like China stuff because simply because of the tariff changes in the United States, right? They've Trump went up to like 124%, and then he was talking about maybe we'll do like 240%. With exemptions. It's getting so complicated now. I don't think anybody can follow these.
I think I retweeted one of those like Giga Chat edits of Trump and Xi Jinping, and it's just like I put my tariffs to 145. Oh, I'm gonna match it. Now it's 245. Well, now it's 280. And I think Trump asks Xi like, "Do you even know what tariffs are?" And he says no. Trump says me neither.
But. Yeah, I mean that's the sad thing is that I think like the West could have been able to handle China, but that's not going to happen now because of the way these policies have been run. There's been driven a wedge between. Yeah,
trust the Americans anymore, right?
There's been a wedge that's been driven between Europe and America. So America will have to try to deal with China by themselves, while Europe open up more free trade with China. So this is it's not a great outcome for for anybody really. But I mean that's just how it is now. But yeah, let's finish the article and see where we go from there.
That being we can spend like an entire stream probably talking about China. So let's see here. While we heatedly debate American leaders according to the dichotomy of stupid or crazy without much interest in the challenges that their choices result in, fewer people question our own policies or the consequences of our own actions. Again, I agree we should be able to, separate, internal policy and foreign policy. Perhaps America's most important function in Norway has been to shortcut the public discourse. It's a country that we can influence to a small extent. In what way? Like, honestly, can we influence America? Other than, I guess we have like some oil fund ownership in like some of the big American corporations. And we do like to take sort of moral stances there, but not enough to have like a huge impact.
Well, yeah, that is an actual argument. That because the sovereign wealth fund is so big and we control parts of we have shares in Tesla and stuff.
Yeah, if we have like 10% or something of Nvidia or some bullshit, we can we get
the vote in the same way that we'll say like these other oil countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and stuff, like they put their finger on the scale, but I think they're interested in other things than Norway. And my impression is that maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe we could do an episode on like the Norwegian, Qatari, like subversive actions in the United States. It would be funny if that's an actual thing. Like we're paying universities to teach things and actually actively interfering in the same way that I think some of these Middle Eastern countries are. That would be really funny. I don't think that's the case, but I think a lot of people want that to be.
We're going to win by teaching them feminism. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would have almost been a little bit proud because that would have been a proactive thing to do instead of like just sitting there and like waiting for America to do stuff and then reacting. If they're actually trying to funnel, politics in certain directions using their money, I don't think they're doing that. But maybe the chat can enlighten us.
Let's see here. Perhaps America's most important function has been to circuit public discourse. It's a country who can influence to small extents, but which we spend time complaining about instead of looking ourselves in the mirror. Much of the way people feel justified in criticizing celebrities. When anti-Americanism stands in the way of self-reflection, this is a problem. When was the last time you saw a Norwegian journalist criticize the foreign minister for anything? Gigantic missteps are swept under the rug. That's why the warning lights are flashing for our own, quote, great power project. Hang on a moment. Our current foreign minister are getting a lot of flack, especially for his sort of anti-Israel stance, isn't he?
By who? Probably not by the mainstream media. I think it seems
No,
to be
I guess not.
consensus there.
Not.
But he's
Yeah.
if you talk about like the circles we interact with, the alternate populist circles, he's just being smashed. He is one of these objects of hate for the populist right online. I've noticed this is sort of Espen Barth Eide memes. I know that the Russians know about him as well. Like they're targeting him as. They have this narrative because he was in the what I think some of these Snowden files or something that there's some documents that the CIA had on Espen Barth Eide about they had like a profile on him. What exactly was that file drop? I don't remember the name of it.
I don't remember
I'll
either,
just try
but
to
yes, I
Google
remember it. Yeah. I can keep reading a bit. We'll still seem unable to admit that we have read the map wrong and we now find ourselves on the wrong track, led by the same people who got us lost. The answer to these missteps is not to change course, but instead justify a bigger mistake, force upon ourselves an EU membership that few of us really want. Now this is an interesting conclusion. Norway demobilized as the clouds gathered and is today unable to defend its own territory without the help of the Americans. The paper's former foreign editor, Kjell Ragnes, called the sum total of defense reforms after the Cold War a managed liquidation, which a lot of EU European countries did. A shame.
So just a quick interjection here. So it was WikiLeaks that leaked some internal memos from the U.S. Embassy in 2008. And they talk about how he was like a weaselly character, and he was interested in his own career advancement, and like they had a certain profile on him that he was he's okay, but he can't really be our guy because he's too self-interested and too hard to, he's not going to be an American loyalist. Essentially, was the conclusion.
The eternal Norwegian, huh?
They've extrapolated this into other dimensions in this kind of like paranoid, cutard imagination as to what that means for him. And like the Norwegian alt media like Document.no, they're talking about they keep bringing that up, and they keep spinning this into like these weird imaginary scenarios where he's on like blackmail list, he's being compromised by the Epstein network and things like this. I think they're getting a little bit too excited. Yeah. But he's not popular in that segment.
Our leaders willingly dismantled Norwegian industry, confident in the belief that globalization would not be reversed, as we are now witnessing in real time. Our national interests were defined pointlessly broadly to include the many leisure activities of the foreign ministry. They certainly could not imagine that making us more dependent on the US would make us even more dependent on the US. I think this is on purpose. Like, who would have thunk? The EU lacks the ability, will, and experience to place the US as a security provider. Now that's interesting. Like, I know he has already taken this in an anti-EU stance. You can say that it lacks the experience, but I think it's too early to say that it lacks the ability and the will. But it would require a bit of a restructuring of the EU.
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen, but Toye has always been like an EU pessimist, and that's what it's in most of his books as well. So,
the EU is an international organization without the ability to project power on its own behalf or on the behalf of others. Well, I mean, okay, yes, if you're saying that the EU is going to stay that way forever, then you're right. But, I mean, it's kind of stupid because everyone who's talking about the EU becoming a thing is talking about the EU becoming an army, right? Or having an army. The only viable path for Norway is to not forget this moment when we felt the consequences of powerlessness on our bodies. We must arm ourselves so that we are able to defend ourselves. Agree. Then we can explore alternatives to a close and asymmetrical bond with the United States, but not before. The reason is simple. bad things can always get worse. If the anti-Americanism in the Conservative and Labour parties is taken to its natural conclusion, Norway could end up without credible security guarantees in the face of a Russia that probably believes we are one of the main sponsors of a proxy war directed against them. Well, I mean, I haven't listened to the speeches, but I highly doubt that anyone who has been sort of anti-American in the Conservative Party now is saying that we should literally cut off all ties with America tomorrow, you know, come hell or high water, and try to defend ourselves against the Russian invasion, right? This is long-term talk.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, from Toya's perspective, like the EU is just hopeless anyway, right? So he just sees two options. It's either we continue the transatlantic partnership, or we have to, you know, arm ourselves like the Finland before they joined NATO.
Yeah, I think regardless of what we do, we should arm ourselves. I mean, that's just not a question, right? Let's see here. Björnboe was a hypocrite. He never loved America. Like so many Norwegians of the 68, he, on the contrary, gave free rein to his prejudices when it came to the leader of the West. Today it is the liberal right that experiences that reflexive globalism is no longer America's modus operandi. Björnboe understood that this is not about geography or politics, but about identity, about the fear of the America within ourselves. Maybe we could learn from the USA and think more about our own future. Don't forget that, as historian Geir Lundestad never tired of pointing out, whoever has bet against the USA for the last 150 years has lost. Yeah, but the, you know, Assad must go meme only lasted for so long, right?
Yeah, it's the what is
He's
it?
literally just saying, yeah, but this guy has been gabbling for 150 years and he hasn't lost yet. So next time it's going to be, you know, you're always rolling the dice, right?
The Nassim Taleb analogy about the turkey, right? If you try to map out the life of a turkey, the comfort of a turkey on like a graph, it's going up until it's not. Like, I mean, it gives you sort of usually it's kind of a wrong picture of the idea of it. It's sort of, if you're just looking at kind of the graph of like, okay, how is the turkey doing? Then it's doing pretty well until it gets its head chopped off. But that was the point the entire time. So you're kind of missing the forest for the trees if you're going by, you know, well, it's only gone up until now.
Mitchell Couchman says, the question, I think, is can the EU ship be turned around when it's deliberately set up to separate itself from direct democracy? Well, this is going to sound a bit harebrained, but I think that ultimately could be a strength. The issue of the EU going forward would be, is it too bureaucratic? If the EU were to arm itself and sort of become an actual force, let's just say, you know, Hearts of Iron 4, we all decide to join EU, we create an EU army, EU would have to become essentially just smaller, more imperialistic, consolidate power at the top, and we'd have, you know, a president, aka emperor of the Europe, right? And the question is the EU bureaucracy too big to be able to do something like this?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, yeah, the EU has...
It's not about direct democracy. It's actually, in this case, not being a direct democracy is a strength, right?
Making it more directly democratic would probably not help, actually.
No.
Like you need command structures and being able to act top down on behalf of Europe. And of course, that in sometimes means that it's going to be less democratic. The only problem is that, you know, I think the EU is sort of too big. There's certain countries that might have to be shafted, and people do talk about, you know, okay, well, Europe is like 600 million people or whatever, and the economy is this big and yada yada yada. And the problem is that not all of those people are net contributors. It's sad to say, but like, I mean, what are you going to do with somebody like Spain, for example? They seem to kind of really not give a shit when you're talking about
draw a line, you know, beneath France and Germany, and kind of just say, sorry, guys.
France and Germany, Greece, for example, or some of these countries. I mean, you mightn't want them in the coalition to coordinate, you know, immigration policy because they border on Africa. But in terms of like coordinating an army about this, they might just feel like that's just kind of not necessary at all. They're not going to be interested in contributing to it, and whenever they're called upon to sacrifice anything, they're just going to say no. And like, you probably don't want people like that in the union. If it was up to me, it would be like the Scandi countries. If you have like the Baltics, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, maybe like France, Germany, some maybe Poland or something, but and some Eastern European countries, but that would be kind of it. I'm not that I'm not that bullish on Southern European countries.
And I would be hesitant to include some of the Eastern European ones, right?
Yeah.
So they would have to become honorary Aryans, I guess. That's not the meme. Mitchell Kutchman says, it's a strength if you hold the power, a weakness if you don't. Well, that just goes for everything. But the thing is that as a small nation, Norway's never going to necessarily be the one on top, right? Yeah. The thing that keeps coming up is like everyone loves the idea of the Nordic Alliance or like the Kalmar Union 2.0. Everyone wants that, so I guess we should just get on it.
Yeah, I think at least it would be better to have them, these countries as a bloc. Like they have one military policy and they have one coordinated trade policy.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound that crazy. I mean, I think the countries are common enough. It should be, I actually think like Norway would be the biggest break in getting anything like that done, because they sort of, okay, well, we just have so much more money than everybody else. And,
it would hurt us more.
Internally, the people would just like, no, they're not interested in sharing. Like, we might have to cut the larger check because we have more money, right? And that would be part of the expectation that we have to, it would be a percentage based, for example, like the amount you contribute, and that's the argument from the people inside Norway who don't want to join the EU, is that the contribution to the EU is going to be like a percentage of GDP, and because the Norwegian GDP is so much higher than everybody else, there's so much internal resistance to joining. Really, they just don't want to. Yeah, they're comfortable. Essentially, they want to spend that money on their own people, and they don't want to share. So it does pain me to say this, because I talk about like other people not contributing, but it does look like Norway is going to be like in many ways like that country that's holding this thing back more than anybody else.
We'll see. We have $2 American from Florida Man, who blesses this episode. Thank you, Florida Man. As always. Let's see here. Anything we have time for, or should we just round off? I don't think we have time.
I think we're over time already. So
yeah, we're almost at 1.5 hours. So if there's nothing else in the chat right now, we can round off. Next week, I think we'll take a week off, because I will probably be traveling to the Karlstage in Germany. So you might have to wait 2 weeks for us to get back. Other than that, I don't think we have any announcements. Ludwig Path, anything you want to say before we leave?
No, I'm good. Have a happy Easter, everyone, and thanks for tuning in.
Have a happy rest of your Easter. Have a good rest of your night, and we will see you guys in about 2 weeks' time. All right. Bye-bye.